There's something I need to walk you through about what just went down in Cleveland, and I'm not talking about the version that got reduced to a depth chart blurb or a practice report filed between two other stories that day. I'm talking about what actually occurred on that field, what it communicated, and why the people still treating this quarterback situation as genuinely unresolved are either not watching the same film I am, or have made a deliberate choice to look away from something that isn't particularly comfortable to confront directly. Because minicamp sessions don't usually carry this kind of weight. Most of them don't. But every once in a while, a practice field stops being a practice field and starts being a verdict. That's what happened in Cleveland. And I want to make sure you understand exactly why. Before a single pass was thrown, before any statistical line existed to debate or contextualize or explain away, the story was already being written in the most unambiguous language professional football knows how to use: rep distribution. Where a quarterback lines up in practice is not an administrative detail. It's not a scheduling convenience. It is an organizational declaration made by people whose entire professional function is to be right about football decisions. People who study film for hours before sunrise, who have already formed precise opinions about what each player in that building is and what each player isn't, and who communicate those opinions through the one currency that means something on a professional practice field: first team repetitions. Shedeur Sanders walked to where the first team offense was operating. That walk communicated everything. Todd Monken's staff didn't stumble into that decision accidentally. NFL coaching staffs operating under a new head coach in an entirely new organizational era don't distribute opening evaluation reps carelessly. Not in the first minicamp, not when the entire building is watching, calibrating, forming its understanding of the hierarchy that will shape the rest of the season. Every player in that facility saw where Shedeur lined up. Every player understood immediately what it meant. And every player understood equally clearly what Dillon Gabriel's placement with the second unit meant for the shape of the competition they were about to witness. I want to be honest about what Gabriel's positioning offered him, because fairness matters here. Second team isn't automatic elimination. It's a challenge. It's the coaching staff setting a threshold in full view of everyone and leaving the door open for someone to crash through it with performance so undeniable that the people holding clipboards have no intellectually honest choice but to reconsider. That door was available. What Gabriel did was walk directly away from it. 3 completions, 6 attempts, 2 interceptions in 7-on-7, and I need you to understand what 7-on-7 actually is before we talk about what those numbers mean, because the format matters enormously to how you interpret the result. 7-on-7 is the most quarterback-accommodating evaluation structure that practice football has. There is no pass rush. Zero. Nobody threatening your release point from the edge. Nobody collapsing your pocket. Nobody introducing the kind of kinetic chaos that makes live football genuinely difficult. Defensive backs are operating in space, yes, but they cannot touch you, disrupt your footwork, or alter your delivery. In this environment, a quarterback's only real obstacles are internal: his preparation, his ability to read coverage before the snap, and his conviction when the ball leaves his hand. 3 completions on 6 attempts with 2 turnovers in that environment isn't a new system showing its learning curve. It's a quarterback going 50% against the least demanding version of the test that exists, with nothing external to absorb any part of the accountability. But here's the thing. The raw numbers, bad as they are not actually what I keep returning to when I think about that practice. There's a specific moment that no completion percentage can fully capture, a moment that sits at the center of the entire story and changes the meaning of everything surrounding it. Gabriel ran his pre-snap process correctly. Motion man, defensive adjustment, coverage read. He did the mental work before the ball moved. He arrived at the right receiver. Then the throw happened, and it carried nothing. No conviction, no velocity, no authority behind it. The ball traveled through the air with the specific quality that experienced football people recognize instantly. That particular weightlessness that appears when a quarterback's mechanics and his internal decision-making have quietly separated from each other. When the body is completing the motion, while something underneath has already started negotiating with itself about whether the decision was right. Every coach who has watched enough football knows that throw the instant it appears on film. Defenders have a word for it. They call it a gift. Not a miscalculation forced by a disguised coverage shell. Not a mistake manufactured by genuine defensive pressure. A gift. Something that arrives in a defender's hands already belonging to him, offered freely before he's committed to the first step of his route to it. The person who caught that gift was a tryout player, not a veteran corner with a decade of NFL film study cataloged in his memory. A man who drove to that facility on nothing but belief, hoping someone inside that building would give him one real moment to hold on to. He caught it cleanly, and the reason that play carries weight far beyond what any stat line can represent is the context it creates permanently in every film room that runs it afterward. A starting quarterback getting intercepted by a seasoned corner on a well-disguised coverage scheme That's football. Everyone in the building logs it as a situational lesson and moves forward. Nobody extracts existential meaning from it. But a quarterback handing the defining moment of a tryout player's career evaluation to that tryout player on a routine attempt in a controlled setting, that gets replayed. That follows him into every conversation about first-team rep access for the rest of training camp and beyond, because the film doesn't have a memory for excuses. It just has what happened. Then came the press conference. And honestly, this is where my reaction shifted from analytical to something more personal, because a difficult practice session has a recovery path. You sit with the film, you identify the specific breakdowns, you have the honest conversation with the coaching staff about what the corrections look like, and you arrive at the next session with something different to demonstrate. That's professional football. Every quarterback in the league has used that cycle at some point. But words spoken publicly don't have that same correction mechanism. Once they exist in front of cameras, they exist permanently. Archived, quoted, pulled into the next conversation about who this competition actually belongs to. A reporter asked Gabriel where he spent his offseason. That's about as open an invitation as a press conference question offers. It costs nothing to answer well, and it means everything if you answer poorly. You talk about film work. You talk about mechanical refinements you made with your private coach during the spring. You describe specific conversations you had with Monk and staff about what their system demands from a quarterback who has to process coverage pre-snap and deliver inside compressed windows. You say anything at all, that demonstrates genuine awareness of what this opportunity required of you during the months when nobody was watching and nobody was grading. His answer was 3 words. I was places. I genuinely sat back when I heard that, because there are only 2 interpretations of an answer that's stripped down, and neither one is reassuring for someone competing for the most consequential job on an NFL roster. Either he doesn't fully understand the weight of the situation he's inside, or he understands it completely and has decided not to engage with it honestly when cameras are present. I don't know which version is true. I know both versions describe a real problem. When follow-up questions arrived about his progress in the new playbook, the answers got longer, while simultaneously becoming emptier. He talked about how offensive systems share conceptual DNA. He talked about how different quarterbacks have their own individual processing styles. He talked about learning as a continuous, evolving, organic experience. I've heard quarterbacks discuss preparation from a place of genuine, deep immersion in it. It has a recognizable texture, actual opinions about what the system rewards, mechanical preferences developed through real repetition, specific tendencies within the scheme that you've already started building individual responses to. Gabriel had none of that texture. He had structure with nothing filling it, the press conference equivalent of that drifting interception, organized in form, already empty before it finished traveling. Now put Shedeur Sanders next to that, and I'm asking you to actually look at the contrast rather than just register that it exists. When Shedeur discusses his off-season preparation, there's no vague geography, no general process language, no comfortable abstraction. He identifies specific mechanical adjustments he prioritized and explains the reasoning behind why those particular things became the priority. He references real exchanges with the new coaching staff about what their system demands and how he constructed his preparation around answering those demands. He describes things he identified in his own film from last season that he decided were insufficient and what he specifically built to correct them. That level of precision has only one possible source. It comes from someone who actually lived inside the preparation, who was genuinely absorbed by the opportunity they knew was approaching. Who treated the invisible months, when no camera exists, when no coach is watching, when the only accountability is the one you create for yourself, as the months that actually determine what the visible ones produce. Specificity like that isn't personality. It isn't confidence performing as substance. It is evidence. It is the unavoidable residue left by work that was genuinely and seriously done. There's another dimension to this situation that I think deserves more direct honesty than it usually receives. Last season in Cleveland was not simply difficult for Shedeur Sanders in terms of raw statistics or team outcomes. The difficulty had a specific character. His development was being actively managed downward from inside the organization by forces that had nothing to do with what he was showing on the field, and everything to do with financial structures and institutional commitments that predated his arrival in that building entirely. Gabriel was present through all of it. He watched the situation unfold. He collected the direct positional benefits of a rep structure that was never built on genuine competitive evaluation, and he said nothing publicly about the fundamental inequity of the environment surrounding him. I'm not suggesting he engineered that environment or made it worse deliberately, but he moved through an entire season as a quiet beneficiary of a compromised arrangement, then arrived at this mini-camp talking about familiar faces and fresh energy as though none of the immediately preceding history registers as something requiring acknowledgement. That posture doesn't hold. The accountability deferred in press conference rooms keeps showing up on the practice field, one drifting interception at a time, because the practice field doesn't honor carefully managed narratives. It just keeps asking the same question until it receives a real answer. Todd Monken operates a fundamentally different kind of evaluation than what existed in that building a year ago. The previous regime had the organizational flexibility to dress predetermined conclusions in the language of genuine competition. Monken works from a single question that no prior staff positioning, no historical relationships, and no institutional inertia can modify. Who gives this team the best realistic chance to win? That question has no political answer. It doesn't reward someone for where they appeared on a previous coordinator's evaluation board. It has a film answer and a practice field answer, and on the first day of this minicamp, both answers arrived in the same session, with a clarity that made further interpretation feel almost unnecessary. One quarterback operated with the first-team offense carrying the settled authority of someone who has absorbed the system at its most demanding levels, and arrived prepared to demonstrate that absorption under real evaluation conditions. His decisions came ahead of the pressure that would have produced wrong ones. His deliveries carried genuine weight, the kind that makes defensive backs respect the throwing window, because they understand that committing before release means the ball is already on its way. The other quarterback completed half his attempts in the most forgiving conditions practice football offers, including one throw that arrived as a voluntary gift to a tryout player who will carry that catch with him for the rest of his life. The distance between those two performances wasn't a matter of perspective or analytical framing. It was immediate and total. What makes this moment larger than a routine depth chart development is what it represents inside the full arc of everything Shedeur has already navigated to get here. He entered this league inside a situation designed, whether through deliberate institutional calculation or pure organizational negligence, to restrict what he could demonstrate. He spent a season watching genuine developmental opportunities get redirected by forces entirely outside his control. He absorbed a complete coaching overhaul and a total system reset, and then walked into the first legitimate evaluation window of this new era, prepared at a level that went beyond adequate preparation. It looked almost obsessive in the best possible sense, like a player who had been waiting long enough for a real opportunity that when it finally arrived, he had already over-prepared for it several times over. That kind of resilience doesn't get nearly enough honest acknowledgement in conversations about what actually separates quarterbacks who become franchise cornerstones from players who have the talent but lose the thread the first time genuine adversity appears. Shedeur found solid footing inside conditions that were specifically structured to undermine it, and he arrived at this minicamp sharper for the difficulty rather than diminished by it. Cleveland's relationship with optimism at the quarterback position has been reshaped over years of specific repeated disappointment into something that barely resembles optimism anymore. I understand that reflex. I genuinely do. When you've watched enough promising situations quietly dissolve into the same outcome wearing different names, self-protection stops being pessimism and starts being pattern recognition. The fan base has earned every ounce of that protective instinct through seasons of hard education. Hope in that city has historically functioned as the opening movement of a particular kind of pain, and the protection against that pattern has become almost instinctive by now. But what's standing in front of Cleveland at this moment is not a developmental projection, requiring ideal conditions and extended patience before it eventually reveals itself. It is a quarterback who has already answered the most important question in this evaluation window. Not theoretically, not in terms of ceiling language or projection conversations or the comfortable vagueness that fills depth chart discussions when there isn't much concrete to actually point toward. On the field, in front of the coaching staff that matters, under the actual conditions that are designed to produce honest answers. The answer was delivered plainly. And the thing about answers delivered plainly on a practice field is that they don't require interpretation, they require acknowledgement. The formal announcement will come whenever the organizational timeline dictates it comes. Monken will say the words in front of cameras on whatever day that press conference gets scheduled, but the practice field already delivered every relevant verdict. The rep structure communicated it before the first snap of the session. The film documented it in full, frame by frame, without edits, and somewhere underneath the careful press conference language and the deliberately managed vagueness that surrounds every public quarterback competition, I think Gabriel already carries the answer inside him. He felt it when first-team reps went the other direction. He felt it in his hand when the ball left without conviction, and he already knew before any defender had completed a single step toward it, that the moment was already gone. Athletes register these things in real time, even when the public language available to them has no honest mechanism for holding what they already know. Shedeur Sanders is the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. The field said so first. The film confirmed it completely. Everything that follows from here is just the paperwork catching up.